If you love talking about cats, but your friends and family are kind of over it, this is the podcast for you. Join your hosts, Danielle Stray Woolley and Elizabeth Calico Gearhart, on the Jersey Podcats, where everyday cat lovers share funny stories, challenging situations, and ask their questions about cats. All right, let's get right into this episode.
Hi, everybody. I am Danielle Woolley.
And I'm Elizabeth Gearhart, and we are the Jersey
Podcats. Yes.
And today we have the marvelous Julie Marty-Pearson. I love her. If you could see her on YouTube, if you look at her on our Instagram, she is just a cat woman after our own hearts. She has her own podcast called The Story of My Pet Podcast. And I listened to a little bit of it. She gets into it with pet owners, I'll tell you what. But welcome, Julie. We're so happy to have you on our podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to two fellow cat ladies.
And then before you jump in, Elizabeth, you know I was going to do this. I'm sorry. I just have to give you an invisible award, actually. I was going to print something up, but you are the first guest, Julie, to answer every single question on our guest form. Woo-hoo! So you win the award for the most devoted cat person that we've had on the show so far.
Oh, thank you.
So
I'm a data person, so I'm like, you give me a form, I'm going to fill it all out.
Nice.
So when you first came on, before we started recording, you and Danielle and I were all saying that our husbands think we're crazy because of the cats we have, what we name them, all this other stuff. But your husband did something even crazier. What did he do?
He brought home a possum. Last August, a few days before my birthday, he comes in with a cardboard box. Scares me. I was still asleep. He goes to work really early in the morning. And I'm like, what did you do? And I open it and there's a tiny baby possum in the box. I'm like, no.
So what did you do with it?
Well, we raised him. There's actually this little picture right up there is a possum in a suit. That is for William the possum. We had him for about 6 months. My husband took incredible care of him, built him his own little house inside the house, researched everything he was supposed to eat and all the things he needed. He grew into a beautiful possum. We put him out back with some area to roam. And one day he decided it was time to go live his own possum life. So he went off, and we're just assuming that he's living a great possum life somewhere.
Oh, that's
he is telling all of his friends about you.
Yes.
Yeah. So how many cats do you have?
Currently, we have 3. We have 14-year-old Charlie, 11-year-old Frenchie now, and our baby. You can see a little calico cat there for her, Pumpkin. She's about 7 months. She was one of a litter I fostered in the fall, and she was the one we adopted.
Foster fail success.
Yes.
You were going to say foster fail. I do have to go back to something you said, though. Your birthday's in August. What's your birth date?
August 25th. I'm a Virgo.
Oh, I'm August 17th. I'm a Leo. But August 17th is also Black Cat Day. So that is so appropriate for me. I think they named it Black Cat Day after they found out about me.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So you love everything cats. Tell us, what is your funniest cat story?
Oh gosh. Funniest cat
We're
story.
jumping right into it.
Right into it. Well, I will say I do love cats. I am an animal lover. I've always been an animal lover. Recently somebody asked me, when you were 5, what did you want to be? And I said I wanted to be an accountant or a veterinarian. And those two, very odd, but it's true. I actually didn't come to love cats until I was an adult. I adopted my first cat at 25, Jack. And that's probably, he has a lot of my funniest stories. So years ago, I live in Bakersfield, California, which is in Central California, about 2 hours away from LA. I actually commuted to a job in LA. I was working at a small university, and I lived on campus during the week and then came home on the weekends. And Jack had developed kidney disease and needed a special diet, so he traveled with me. And probably some of the funniest memories are when I'm traveling and I go through a drive-through to grab a drink, and he's in my lap, and the person comes to the drive-through window to give me my food, and they're like, "Oh, you have a cat in your lap in a car."
Like, you're like, "Yeah, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me."
Oh gosh, where did he come from?
Yeah, they were like, "Well, I've never seen that one before." So definitely, he was my adventure cat. Had a lot of great memories with him.
Aw. Yeah, it's funny when people come to cats later in life. I never quite understand that, because I always say I was born with a cat in my arms, because I can never remember a time in my life when our family did not have cats. So it was just a natural fit for me. We did have dogs every once in a while, which I don't mind dogs. I like them fine, but I don't want to take care of a dog.
Yeah, I grew up with dogs. We always had at least one, sometimes two. So much so that the poodle that was in my family when I was born was a gift to my mom from my dad when they were dating, Fufu. Her portrait hung over the fireplace in our family room my entire life.
That's amazing.
Yes.
So my aunt, who doesn't listen, but I think my uncle does. So if you hear this, Uncle Bob, make sure to tell Aunt Chris I'm talking about this. She always had the picture people come and take pictures of her dogs. And my favorite thing is above her fireplace, she used to have like the wicker furniture and chairs, and her dog, it was Dalmatian. And then she had a little, his name was Louis. I can't remember what kind of dog it was, but it was just this giant Dalmatian and this little dog posing all cute in this giant photo above the fireplace. And it's like, wait, where's my picture?
Well, these pictures behind me that you see, we did have in our family room next to our big TV, but I had to bring them upstairs to my study to do the podcast. So, you are giving me ideas. I do think that I should put a bug in the kids' ears for my birthday, right? Because if the kids give me something like that, Richard can't say no.
That's a good idea.
So, Julie, what do you love most about cats? Like when you were 25 and you got your first cat, what were you thinking? Like,
well, I knew I wanted a pet. I've always loved cats. My mom was allergic, and I realized to more afraid of them. So that's why we never had one, but I would always pet them. And then a close friend of mine got a kitten, and I just fell in love with the kitten. I'd never really been around a baby before. And so I had moved into a new apartment. I'm thinking, what do I want? I want a kitten. So I went to the shelter and adopted my first, which was Jack. And I just fell in love. Cats are my people. They love naps, check. They love treats, check.
right?
They like to cuddle, check. And I never knew, because I'd only grown up with dogs, that cats too have their own unique personalities and are so lovable and can be so bonded to you, but they're also crazy and so funny to just observe their behavior too. So yeah, I fell in love and realized quickly that I will never not have a cat again in my life.
Excellent. Good for you. Well, me neither. And my daughter, who doesn't have a cat right now because she's traveling around for her work, but will get one when she settles down, she has agreed that she will take any cats I have when I pass away. So I can keep having cats
of them if you want.
Yeah, exactly. I can keep having cats the rest of my life and feel confident that they'll be taken care of. And
That's cool.
Yeah, she's good with the cats, although she's a lot stricter than I am. Like
only 19 treats instead of 20.
That's funny.
Exactly.
I'm the one that the cats know they can get the treats out of. Like they'll all show up to the bowls and look at me, and I'm like, fine, here, give you treats. I actually have a t-shirt that says treat dealer that is very appropriate for me.
That's great.
So what do you do for your full-time job now?
Well, I do a few different things, actually. Before COVID, I worked in colleges and universities. I did accreditation and assessment. So I traveled all over the state, kind of working different places, and then had some health issues. And then COVID hit. And so then I thought, I can't do that anymore. It's exhausting commuting during the week and only being home on the weekend.
All of that.
Yeah. And I hated being away from all my fur babies too.
Yeah.
So I started I have my doctorate in organizational psychology. So I started doing some life coaching, career coaching stuff. And then I took some classes on podcasting, thinking I wanted to do a podcast about that. And then I realized that's not so exciting. And so then I started my podcast about pets. So that's kind of taken me in a new direction. So now I'm a coach for fur moms to help with whatever fur moms need, whether it's support when they've lost a pet or they're adopting a new pet or have a pet with medical issues. But more recently, I've decided to start supporting fur moms who run their own businesses and help them with growing their business. I know a lot of amazing fur moms who run businesses that either support animal rescue or donate to them.
Mhm.
And that's really close to my heart. I've actually volunteered and worked part-time at my local shelter. So that's kind of where my career has gone now, as a coach and as a podcaster.
Well, it's so funny because when we start out, we think we're going to go a certain way and we never know where we're going to end up, right?
Yep, for
But
sure.
Yeah, I think a lot of marketing these days, if you're helping small businesses, a lot of marketing is around authenticity and owning all the parts of yourself and who you are. And I was talking to somebody, well, my husband and I have a radio show, and we're talking to somebody about that kind of thing yesterday. And she was saying, like, own your flaws. And I said, well, so what do you define as a flaw? Because some people think passionately loving cats is a flaw. And I know people that hate cats. I said, I think it's a virtue. But I haven't really owned it fully openly because I'm in business and all this other stuff. But I'm just going to own it now because everybody's so into authenticity.
No, I think that's so true, because I would have never showed up on something that's going to be posted far and wide with sparkly cat ears on before in my other life, because it was about suits and professionalism and, all those things. And I've always been an animal lover. And people have always kind of called me a crazy cat lady once I started just collecting all the cats. And it's like, well, why am I hiding a part of who I truly am? That's who I am. I can be funny. I'm a very quiet person naturally, so people don't always see my personality. But if you see my what's around me, you realize that that is my personality. And I love animals, and anybody who wants to talk about them, I'm happy to sit down and let's talk about our pets. So that's just who I am.
I love it.
I also think it's important for me. I'm a 45-year-old woman without human kids. So my fur kids are my kids. And I know there's a lot more women like me at my age that haven't had kids for one reason or another. And sometimes there is,
kids.
This look down on us that we treat our animals like kids, but they are our kids in a different way, but also in the same way. So that's something I've realized is authentic to me. And I just want to be able to get more people to open up about that.
Well, I have to tell you, ladies, that when I had my son and I was young, I worked with somebody, and she said, wow, if it was a choice for you between the kid and the cat, you'd take the cat.
And you're like, I am pleading the fifth so that somebody doesn't show up and steal my son.
And no, nobody ever took my kid. I would never have let my kid go, but I would never have let my cat go either. So I mean,
right.
I do understand how you can deeply love an animal. And I think that,
There's
Max.
Hi, Max.
That was Max's back. And I think a lot of people do deeply love their animals. And I mean, I think part of it is that they'll sit there and listen to you. Right?
Yes. Right.
Like my husband will always go, what was that? What was that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and then he'll repeat back, I think you said something about this. I'm like, you weren't listening. But Max was.
Well, and the thing about pets is when you grieve a pet, it is a special kind of grief because they literally are part of your everyday life. They're, the things we do every day are around what they need to be fed or taken care of, or if you have a dog and you have to take them on a walk, all those things that we can grieve for other people in ways, but maybe we didn't even get to spend as much time with them as our pets. So it's such a bond that we have with them. And a lot of people that have never had cats maybe don't realize cats are the same way. I mean, they become so bonded to you. Some of our cats are more bonded to my husband than me, or vice versa. And they have their little unique personalities that I just can't imagine not having that, a part of my everyday.
I agree. Danielle, what do you feel?
Our lives would be so boring.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm actually thinking back to your very thought out form that you filled out. So thank you again. Where you had mentioned about how special fostering was for you, and how you now like to share your stories about that. I connected with that a lot because I had suffered a pretty great loss and was looking for something to put my energy into, and then decided to get involved with rescue, and didn't think I could do fostering because I figured I'd be a foster fail. Spoiler alert, I was. But if we hadn't done that, not to say I used the cats, but like if I hadn't done that, like I don't know how else I would have coped with what I was going through, like I'm sure I could have found something else. But it was just so special for me. So now I try to explain to people, like, not gonna lie to you, you might be a foster fail. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. But if not, like even just temporarily having the cats as not a distraction, but as a way to put your energy into something healthy that you're giving to them, but really it's kind of selfish because they're making you feel so good.
Absolutely. And that's so true for me. I had never fostered before. I started my podcast a year ago, and one of the first people
Happy
I had
anniversary.
on. Thank you. One of the people I had on works at my local county shelter, and she talked about all the things that you can do to support them as a volunteer, as a foster. And so I had volunteered at the shelter a few times, and I had signed up to be a foster, but I hadn't actually done it yet. And it was in October, and I happened to go to the shelter for something else. I had been volunteering or something, and I said to someone, well, are there any, it's in the fall, it's kind of quiet kitten wise. And I said, well, are there any kittens, that need some extra attention? And they're like, well, we have this one who's really malnourished, and, we need meds, and we're trying to get him to eat, but, they can't only check on him so many times in the shelter. So I said, okay, I'll bring him home. And that was my first foster, who I named Binks. And he quickly became a foster fail. I knew I was going to keep him.
Congratulations.
But unfortunately, he didn't make it. And so, yeah, it was very shocking for me. And I don't want that to turn anybody away from fostering. But I think what's important is that in the shelter, he would have gone through this alone in the cage. And I got to give him 5 days of love and like literally 24-hour attention. And, fading kitten syndrome is real, especially when kittens are out in the wild without a mom. You don't know if and how they're getting food. And his little body had been covered in fleas, so he was anemic, and we were having to give him iron and all of this. And so it was just too much for him. And what's great about that for me, it was very hard. It was very emotional. But I was able to give him a home in those last few days. And we buried him in our backyard, just like, we would any pet of ours. So he's with us forever. And it was hard. And it was a few days before I could even go back to the shelter to take the stuff back. And it just happened to be that day that I took him back. I was just going to call you. We just got a litter of kittens in. Do you want to take them? And I'm like, okay. And so I brought home a litter of 6 2-week-old babies that I bottle fed around the clock. And just imagine bottle feeding every 2 hours, 6 kittens. By the time we're at the end of the 6th, the first one is ready to eat again.
Oh my Lord.
Well, listening to you, Julie, it makes me think I probably got Max just in time, because when I got Max, he was supposedly 8 weeks old. He was only a pound.
Oh, wow.
And he was covered in fleas, and he'd been on a farm in Kentucky, and we gave him a bath with Dawn dish soap, and I had a vet appointment for him. And they said, when the woman dropped him off, she said, well, they'd been mixing wet food in with his dry food. Like that was a bad thing because they gave him all dry food, but his mouth was so tiny. I'm like, how could he possibly have eaten any dry food with a mouth that small? So the first thing I did when I got him home was to give him some wet kitten food, and he just went at it like he was crazy. He gained half a pound in 5 days. By the time I took him to the vet 5 days later, he had gained half a pound, and he just kept gaining and gaining and gaining. And then he got the whole rash thing, which we'll talk about later, which we solved with Zyrtec and steroid. But listening to you, I think he was probably close to that.
Yeah, Charlie, who's our oldest cat now, we actually found him in my parents' backyard. And he was definitely, now that I know more about cats, I can look back and say, okay, he was under 2 weeks old, and he was very fragile, and I didn't know what I was doing. He was my very first bottle baby. It was all research and, just trying it out. And, he turned into this gorgeous, big, healthy cat. And then several years later, same thing happened with my Frenchie. We found her in our backyard. And I realized having Binks as a foster is like, wow, I'm so lucky that Charlie and Frenchie made it, because I really didn't know what I was doing with them. And somehow they thrived and, became healthy cats. So yeah, it was kind of eye-opening to me that how fragile kittens are, and people don't really know that when maybe they find them outside somewhere and there isn't a mom. They really are fragile. But so he taught me a lot, but he also made me so much more thankful for my babies that I had been able to raise, and they were able to become healthy cats and live long lives with me.
Yeah. Now, do you get all your cats spayed and neutered?
Oh, yes. I am a huge spay and neuter proponent. We do not want our female cats, first of all, to go through heat. Second of all, to go through pregnancy. Both of those things are very hard on cats. And where I live in California, we have a huge feral cat population. And
remind everybody what area that is again.
I'm in Bakersfield, California, which is Central California. It's about 2 hours north of LA, about 4 hours south of San Francisco. So right in the middle.
And now, Danielle tells me that feral and stray are two different things. Would you really classify them as feral, or would you classify them as stray?
In our community, we have both, but feral is huge because we're in a big agriculture area. So we have a lot of cats that live and have grown up outside. So they're feral in that they've never been touched by a human and they don't want any interaction of a human, versus a stray is typically more of a house cat that someone either has dumped or has gotten lost or has run away or something like that. So they are different. And in California, cats are considered free roaming, which means you can't bring strays into the shelter because cats aren't considered strays. They're considered feral. So they can only take in a cat if they're sick or injured. So that really impacts the amount of cats we have in our community. People feed colonies. You know, we try to trap and then spay and neuter so that we decrease, but it's a huge problem in my area, but also just in the state. So we are very much a proponent of spay neuter and reduce the kittens because it's also hot here a lot longer than it is in other areas. So kitten season for us is like April to October.
Wow. You just made me cringe a little because I work with rescue too. And it's like, I couldn't imagine dealing with kitten season year round.
Yeah. Danielle, what's the name of your rescue?
I work with Tommy's Cats Rescue based out of Homedale, New Jersey. And I also volunteer with a couple of others for Friends in Need and Pet Adoption Network. And spay and neuter is big too. Like we even go as far as if anybody's applying to adopt one of the cats within those groups, they have to show proof of like that they're taking care of their current animals and that they have vet records and that they're spayed and neutered. Because, you know, what we don't want to happen is if God forbid something happens and the animals get out, or if it comes up to one or the other, and then they're having more puppies or more kittens and they have to make a choice. Like we don't even want that to be part of the equation.
Yeah, the shelter that I fostered for and work with, they spay and neuter all the kittens. And if a kitten happens to get adopted before it's been, they make an appointment so they can bring it back to the shelter to get spayed, and it's no cost. For the same reason, we want to reduce the risk of more kittens in any way we can.
And what's the name of your shelter?
I work with and volunteer at Kern County Animal Services. They are the county shelter here. We also have a city shelter, the City of Bakersfield shelter. So we actually have two. It's a little confusing, but they're both maxed out and full of dogs and cats right now. We are hugely overpopulated in both areas. So I've been working with that shelter, but also a lot of local rescues to learn the process and what we can do to help, because it's just, I take my cat ears off to people in rescue because it is just so crazy right now. It seems like it's never ending. And
yeah, I personally stepped back from doing the trapping. I mean, I'll do pickups and transfers and I help bring animals to adoption day, or I'll check in on some of the foster cats, but I was just getting so burnt out. It was just like, I felt like I wasn't doing enough. So then I just switched gears, and now I use my skills of marketing and connecting and helping organize and processes and going that route versus feeling like I have to be out there trapping all the time.
Yeah, burnout is so huge in rescue, dogs and cats. And right now in California, our shelters are just maxed out. And unfortunately, animals are getting euthanized just for space because of that. So I've had been doing some offsite adoptions for my county shelter, but now I'm kind of taking a step back and refocusing on my podcast so I can get more education out, because I feel like that's a powerful tool.
Yeah, and I think this is a good opportunity just to kind of do a little plug for one of our previous guests. If anybody is not aware, there's a group out there called Rescuing the Rescuer. So if you are involved in animal rescue and you're feeling burnt out, please reach out to that group. That you can find them on Facebook, and they have resources and support for you.
And you can actually find a link to that in my social media because I'm a part of that group.
Cool. So am I. It's on our website.
Yes.
See, we would have met eventually.
Exactly. Yeah. I was one of the first people that Sally and Sterling brought in to help. And it's a great group. That one's specifically for cat and kitten rescue. And it's a great support group. And I definitely see the need for dogs too. So maybe that might be something I, try to work on, because I know a lot of great people in dog rescue in my area. But it is so important. People don't realize whether you're a volunteer or you work in a shelter or rescue, or you run a rescue, or you're just a foster, all of that, the burnout is so high. The compassion fatigue, it's so hard, because as soon as one animal's set or you've helped them, there's 12 more waiting to be helped. So
and it's not even that. Sometimes it's the humans that make it more difficult than the animals do. That could be another episode, because I know we're kind of coming up on time soon.
Well, I do want to make one little comment about rescuing cats from a shelter. So I know we're talking kittens, and Max is a kitten that I rescued, and I was hoping that we held him a lot. We carried him a lot. I was hoping he would be more human than kitten. But the two older cats were a little older when we rescued them. And he has decided to model his behavior after theirs. So now he's getting to be a big cat that's all aloof and does whatever he wants and tells me what's what.
He's a teenager now.
But I will say, so Lily had a litter of kittens when the rescue, and she came from Georgia when they found her, and they spayed her, and we went to a pet store where they were doing an adoption day, and I didn't realize she had just been spayed. So we got Lily, but Mercutio was found at 4 months in a dumpster behind a Best Buy, and they took him to a shelter, which happened to be a kill shelter. I don't know. I've looked for that shelter since. I don't know if it's still there. So I decided when I was going to get him to go to a kill shelter and save a life. And he had been there for 4 months. So by the time I got Mercutio, he was 8 months old. But Mercutio, even though he's still kind of wild, he's getting older now, is my baby. So even if you don't get a little tiny kitten, you can get a cat that I'll tell you what, after we got Mercutio out of that cage in the shelter, he stretched out as long as he could, as long as he could, like paw to paw. And he stayed that way for weeks, I swear, because he's like, oh, thank goodness, I'm out of this box.
I think that's so important. I've happened to get mine all mostly as kittens, but there's so many amazing adult cats, even a year or two old adult cats. Mm-hmm. And because who knows what their life has been on the street or whatever it has been before the shelter, sometimes they're even more cuddly and affectionate than the kittens are, because they're just so appreciative to have a home and not be stuck in a cage anymore. And we have so many kittens. There's always plenty of kittens to be adopted, but I definitely agree with you that people should not just think a kitten is the only way to go, because a cat that's a little older can still be your best friend and need your love even more.
Yeah, I actually have some fur mom guilt I have to get off my chest right now. So when I was doing rescue, it all started off with the fostering part was going to be, can you hold this cat overnight? Because we thought it was a trap and release. I'm air quoting for anybody who can't see, so you know where this is going. And it was an older cat, ginger cat, looked like its eye was injured. It had a bleeding spot, like a hole in its back. We took it, we got it neutered, got it stitched up, and they said, just hold it for 24 hours to make sure it's okay before you release it back, because they thought he was feral. It just so happened that he just needs some extra loving because he didn't feel good. He couldn't see, he knew what was going on. And since they had me holding him, they're like, oh, what's one more? Come grab this other cat so we can move some cats around. So there's 2 of them. Okay. So then comes Tony, a little kitten. And then I felt bad because Tony, I was like, you go away. You're a kitten. You're going to get adopted. No problem. Poor Derek. Nobody wants him. I wound up keeping both. But I still feel terrible to this day because I remember saying those words to him, go away. Derek needs more love right now. You'll be fine.
Aww.
So, and he's my angel. He's so sweet.
Well, I do have one more little cushy story. So when my daughter was living here, one time she was in her room in bed, and Cushy always sleeps with me when he's in the house. And I went and looked in her room, and Cushy was in bed with her. And I have never seen a cat give such a guilty look. He had such a guilty look on his face. It's like, I'm not cheating on you, really.
That's funny.
That happens with my cat. Sometimes I'll come out into the living room and Frenchie will be laying on my husband, and she'll see me like, oh, Oh, you didn't catch me. I'm not doing this.
I was here first. He just sat next to me. I didn't go to him. Oh my gosh. Well, this is so fun. I wish we could keep going.
Me too. So,
But
yeah, I guess it's time to go take care of our fur babies now and jump off the podcast. But it's just been a wonderful pleasure talking to you, Julie. This has really been fun. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And then how can people best get in touch with you? I know you listed so many awesome things you're working on. And I usually ask what's something awesome you're doing, but you already shared. So what's the best way people can connect with you?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram, The Story of My Pet Podcast. Season 2 will be coming out later this June. This month now. I realize it is June, not this June. And then you can follow my Fur Mom coaching support area, Fur Mom Tribe, on Instagram and Facebook.
Very cool. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Make sure you're following us on YouTube. Subscribe on the podcast, whatever your favorite, player is. Leave us some reviews, and most importantly, send us some pictures of your cats. We want to see some more pictures of cats. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. Let's keep the conversation going. Give this podcast a rating so other cat lovers can find it. Connect with the Jersey Podcats on social media or visit thejerseypodcats.com and leave a message sharing a story or question about cats. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode.